Welcome to today's episode called Steve Wynn, From Casino Royalty to Exile. I've wanted to cover Wynn for ages because this is the guy who built modern day Vegas. And I mean, make no mistake about it, he took Vegas from its mob and gambling roots into this resort destination focused on luxury, high-end amenities, family-friendly spectacles. The Vegas that we see today, it was built and shaped by Wynn, by his vision, his ambition, and his attention to detail. And then, after 50 years of being at the very top of the food chain in Vegas, it all came crashing down, literally overnight. It's a fascinating story. Enjoy. Stephen was born in 1942 in New Haven, Connecticut, and his dad, Michael, ran bingo halls up and down the East Coast. The family, you wouldn't say they were mega wealthy, but they lived well. They were very comfortable. And when he was 10 years old, his father, Michael, took him on a trip to Vegas. This was 1952, and his father had a plan to open a bingo hall there because it was at this time that mob money, and very strangely, some Mormon money, was pouring into Vegas, building casinos like the Sahara and the Sands. And while Steve's father didn't end up doing any business in Vegas at that time, young Steve, he was just captivated by the lights, the action, the buzz. As he later said, that's when he decided, when I grow up, I'm going to be a casino boss. Now, in 1963, when Steve was just 21, his dad died during heart surgery, and he left behind a gambling debt of $350,000 because his father was a huge gambler, of course. Steve was still in college at the time and planning to go to law school. As he said, I had no choice. My father's creditors were now my creditors. So he dropped out, married his college girlfriend Elaine, and took over the family's bingo business, and he made it work. He steadied the ship. But the Las Vegas dream was still with him. And in 1967, he and his young family, he had two daughters, they moved there. He invested $45,000 for a 3% stake in the Frontier Casino and worked there as a junior partner and the slots manager. Now, as you can imagine, back in the 60s, Vegas was controlled by the mafia, and the Frontier Casino was secretly owned by the Detroit mob, and specifically a boss by the name of Tony Zarelli. Now, Wynn's connections or dealings with the mob are hard to find. I mean, Wynn has been hounded by rumours of mafia ties dating back decades. And there are examples like New York mob figure Anthony Tony Cakes Castelbuono. He was busted for laundering narcotic proceeds through a Wynn casino in Atlantic City in 1982. Genovese crime family street boss Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, he was intercepted on an FBI wire, being asked by the Cleveland Mafia to use his sway with Wynn to rein him in. And also two mobsters were overhead on a wire talking about how they had Wynn on their side. But everything here is circumstantial. Regulators and gaming authorities conducted thorough background checks on Wynn and on other non-mob entrants of the era, such as Kirk Kerkorian and Howard Hughes, before granting them licenses. And although some mob figures mentioned Wynn in those intercepted conversations, there's no evidence he engaged in mob activity, and the context matters. Las Vegas back at this time, the late 60s, the 70s, it was transitioning from mob-linked casinos to corporate ownership. So some contact with, legacy figures, we'll call them, was unavoidable, but it wasn't collusive. Wynn and these other businessmen were part of a shift that ultimately displaced the mob's influence. Anyway, getting back to the Frontier, within months of him making his investment and working there, several of his partners in the casino were outed as being fronts for the Detroit mob, and as a result of this, the Gaming Commission forced the sale of the casino to Howard Hughes. And it doesn't look like Wynn made a lot of money from this sale, but soon after, Wynn did make his first nice bit of money with the help of this powerful banker in Vegas at that time called E. Parry Thomas. He was in charge of a bank who was the sole lender to casinos at that time. And Thomas became a kind of mentor to Wynn because he could see that Wynn had potential. And here's what Thomas had to say about Wynn. He said he was quick, honest, and had exceptional IQ. So Thomas lent Wynn $1.1 million to buy a strip of land beside Caesar's Palace. And Wynn then sold it to Caesars 11 months later, netting himself $750,000 in profit. And then, on Thomas's advice, Wynn began buying stock in Golden Nugget Inc., which owned the Golden Nugget Casino, which was an aging, tired casino. By mid-1973, Wynn had bought about 5% of the company's shares, and that summer, he walked into a board meeting. He was armed with spreadsheets, and he told the board that they were bleeding profits, that managers were sleeping at the wheel and that employees were skimming. And he said, "Give me the keys for 6 months and I'll show you what this place can do." So they made him chairman and president of the Golden Nugget. He was 31 years old, the youngest casino boss in Vegas. And he didn't waste any time. He gutted the place, installed new everything, new lights, new carpets, fresh everything. He wanted the high rollers. He wore custom suits, walked the floor, shook hands. As we'd say in Ireland, he plum-assed everyone. He also added 759 rooms to the hotel, and then his crowning glory, he got Frank Sinatra to perform regularly at the casino. And not only that, but Sinatra appeared with Wynn in these kind of humorous and kind of cheesy ads. You can watch them on YouTube. Wynn is what you'd expect. He's permatanned, jet black hair, gleaming teeth, very, very smooth. And by the end of the 70s, Wynn had transformed the Golden Nugget, and he expanded the empire with the opening of the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City in 1980. And by 1983, that casino was the most profitable casino in Atlantic City. But Wynn never liked Atlantic City. He called the local government pathetic. He hated all of the regulations. He got into a feud with Donald Trump as they competed against each other. But Wynn was canny. He got out of Atlantic City at exactly the right time. In 1987, he sold his casino there for $440 million, netting a $170 million profit, and then turned all his attention back to Vegas and built the Mirage. The Mirage was this massive success. It had over 3,000 rooms. It had an erupting volcano out front, tropical lagoons, real palm trees, a rainforest atrium indoors. The total cost would be around $630 million, and at the time that would be the most expensive casino ever built in Las Vegas. Nothing came close to it at that time. And where did he get the money to build this? Well, from our old friend Michael Milken, the junk bond king. He seems to appear in nearly every second episode. But just to break even, the Mirage would need to clear over $1 million a day in revenue. And that was a number that no casino ever consistently hit. By late 1989, the Mirage was almost ready to open, and the rest of Vegas was already reacting. Like competing casinos were scrambling to upgrade, and they called it the Mirage effect because there was a building boom going on as a reaction to the Mirage. Now, as the opening approached, Wynn was everywhere, on site, in meetings, obsessing over the tiniest detail. One day, he ordered the front driveway to be jackhammered and repoured because it just didn't feel right when he drove up. Opening night, November 22nd, 1989, Siegfried and Roy with their White Tigers, they performed in a theatre that was specifically designed just for them. So it was spectacle, it was showmanship, and it worked. The Mirage made money from the get-go. In year one, it generated $660 million in revenues. So that's nearly $2 million a day. And it made a profit of about $188 million. And you see, this is how Wynn changed Las Vegas for good. It wasn't just about the casinos. It was about building attractions, about making it a go-to destination, not just for gamblers, but for everyone. Because most people who go there now go for the spectacle, and then they'll gamble a little bit. That's down to Wynn. And his reshaping of Las Vegas worked. Over the next decade, the number of visitors to Las Vegas doubled. In 1993, Wynn opened Treasure Island, and it had pirates, nightly ship battles, explosions in the lagoon, a sense of Disney-fueled adventure for the entire family. Now, while all of this was going on, there was another, far more serious drama in Wynn's life when, in 1993, his daughter Kevin, then aged 26, she was kidnapped. And after Wynn paid a ransom of about $1.5 million, she was found bound and gagged in a car in Las Vegas airport parking lot just a few hours after she'd been snatched. Now, authorities did arrest one of her abductors when he tried to pay off the balance on a Ferrari he had purchased at a dealership in California. Getting back to Wynn and his hotels, his next project is the Bellagio. And this was going to be a retreat of marble, fountains, refinement, with a price tag of 1.6 billion. Again, the most expensive resort Vegas had ever seen. It had 8 acres of water out the front. The lake cost $40 million. It had Tuscan villas, a luxury shopping promenade with brands like Prada and Chanel, gourmet dining, an art gallery with Picasso's, Monet's, Van Gogh's. Wynn spent over 180 million on the art. He saw it not just as a hotel, but as a statement that Vegas could be elegant, it could be sophisticated. Now, by this stage, Michael Milken and his junk bond empire had crumbled, so Wynn raised money by floating Mirage resorts. And the Bellagio opened in 1998. And while that hotel itself was a big success, Wynn had stretched his finances too thin, because at the same time, he'd also opened a new casino in Biloxi that wasn't performing well. And he had taken on too much debt, and the stock started to slide. And in 2000, Kirk Kerkorian, founder of rival casino chain MGM, he swooped in and bought the Mirage Group for $4.4 billion in cash and assumed the $2 billion debt. A lot of people were stunned that Wynn agreed to sell his prized trophies. He had put so much time, effort and creativity into building them. And some speculated that maybe he was just over-leveraged and that this was such a good offer. It was the pragmatic decision to make. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I also think the main driving force behind the sale is Wynn's passion for the creative side of the business. Once the casino is built, he wants to move on to the next project. And here's a quote from him. He said, "I've always been someone who focuses on the next project. The only part I ever enjoyed was the building, the design." Now, as a result of this deal, Wynn walked away with about $400 million. And crucially, as part of the deal, there was no non-compete clause. So as you'd expect, within a month of selling the Mirage Group, he spent $270 million on the Desert Inn, which sat on 215 acres of prime land on the Las Vegas Strip. And of course, this next project was going to be even bigger, even more ambitious, and even more expensive than anything that preceded it, because it had a budget of $2.7 billion. And you got to remember, the economy at this stage now was shaky. 9/11 had just happened, tourism was down. Wynn, however, did secure a crucial strategic partner. Japanese arcade billionaire Kazuo Okada invested $380 million in Wynn's new venture in exchange for a significant stake. And having Okada on board, it gave Wynn's new company, which was now called Wynn Resorts, cash and international credibility, because Wynn was also eyeing opportunities beyond the US in Asia. Now, investors also remembered that this was the same showman who had turned Las Vegas into a world-class destination. So when he was doing the roadshow to float Wynn Resorts, his track record definitely played a role in its success, because the IPO valued the company at $7 billion, even though, you got to remember, by this stage, it didn't have any revenues. And just a quick reminder, while these shorter weekly episodes released every Wednesday are free for everyone, for just $1.99 a month, you get access to our co-hosted hour-long episodes released on the first of every month, where Keith and I do an even deeper dive into an incredible business story. Some of these hour-long episodes are still free in our back catalogue, so you can get a taste of what to expect. Now, as well as getting access to these monthly co-hosted hour-long episodes, behind the paywall are additional bonus episodes. And over the coming months, we'll be adding more bonus episodes for subscribers regularly. Some of these are 2-parters, some are 3-parters, and some are standalone episodes. Also, as a subscriber, you can listen to these weekly episodes ad-free, so you won't have to listen to me telling you about our great subscription offer. And it is a great offer. For just $1.99 a month, you can subscribe via Apple subscriptions, Spotify subscriptions, or on Patreon using the link below, or go to patreon.com/Great Business Stories. The $2.7 billion resort in Vegas was called Wynn Las Vegas. It has a tower made of curved bronze glass, 50 stories, 2,700 rooms, 18 restaurants, 31 boutiques, like a man-made mountain and a waterfall out front, a Ferrari Maserati dealership inside, and of course 2 wedding chapels. he bought the Picasso painting La Rêve for $60 million to house in the hotel. Now, an interesting little side note on this painting, I came across it when I was researching Steve Cohen, the hedge fund billionaire, because he agreed in 2006 to buy La Rêve from Wynn for $139 million. But when Wynn was saying goodbye to the painting, he accidentally put his elbow through the masterpiece. So he scuttled the deal. Now, the story had a happy ending. Wynn managed to restore the painting, and Cohen did buy it from him in 2013 for $155 million. Anyway, getting back to the Wynn Las Vegas. On paper, it sounds kind of over the top. It sounds too flashy for my tastes. But at the time it got rave reviews. It was described as being refined and elegant, and that it set a new standard for luxury and service in Las Vegas. Most importantly, it was a huge financial success from out of the gates. I mean, even to this day, Wynn Las Vegas is the highest earning resort in Las Vegas, with revenues of $1.69 billion and EBITDA of $530 million. And Wynn's previous hotel, the Bellagio, is in second place with revenues of $1.36 billion and EBITDA of $515 million. So he has an amazing track record here. Now, on the back of this success, Wynn expanded. In 2006, Wynn Macau opened. Chinese gamblers arrived in droves. Within a year, Wynn Macau was raking in profits that dwarfed Vegas and continues to do so. I checked the revenues for 2024, and Wynn Macau's revenues were $3.7 billion. That's over double what the Vegas resort makes. Back in Vegas, he built a second luxury resort called Encore, another huge success. So by 2008, Wynn was untouchable. But of course, like any massively wealthy developer, he has had his fair share of disputes and falling out with investors and competitors. And the biggest and perhaps most personal of these happened in 2010 when he fell out big time with his billionaire partner, Kazuo Okada. They had been so close that Wynn had said the following of their relationship. He said, "I love Kazuo Okada as much as any man I've ever met in my life. He's my partner and my friend, and there is hardly anything that I won't do for him." Well, it turns out there was something that Wynn wouldn't do for Okada, because Okada wanted Wynn Resorts to join him in a new casino in the Philippines. And he overtly suggested to the Wynn boards that in some Asian jurisdictions it was customary to give gifts or payments to officials through intermediaries to, shall we say, expedite business. In other words, bribes. Now, the official line from the Wynn board is that they were shocked that such an overt proposal to pay off officials should have been made by Okada, and they declined to invest. And it should also be noted that when I say the board, what I'm really referring to here is Steve Wynn. He controlled the board. To quote a person close to the company, Steve ran that board with an iron hand. Now, Okada, for his part, he was probably baffled and I'm sure angry at the way he was treated, because we'll find out how he was treated in a minute now, and it wasn't good. Because, after all, this was the same board that had recently approved a $135 million donation to the University of Macau while seeking favour with Chinese regulators. Now look, of course nothing improper was ever linked to that university donation, but I can see how Okada would have viewed the board's stance as very hypocritical, but at the same time, I think Okada was very naive in how he brought this matter to the board. I'm pretty sure that those officials he wanted to bribe could have gotten their palms greased in a more covert way. Anyway, the end result was that Okada was kicked off the board, and the board swiftly voted to forcibly redeem Okada's 20% stake in the company. In effect, his $2.7 billion stake was slashed by a 30% discount in exchange for a 10-year, $1.9 billion promissory note. And Wynn's justification for doing this to the guy he proclaimed to love is pretty galling when we uncover what happens next, because this is what Wynn told analysts in relation to the Okada affair. "We've always taken a very strong stance on integrity." Yeah, well, it was Wynn's own integrity, or lack of, that brought him down. And it came about as a result of a huge legal falling out he had with his now ex-wife Elaine. So for context, he and Elaine divorced in 1986, but then they remarried 5 years later and then divorced again in 2010. And throughout all of this time, they had run the company side by side. She was a director, a strategist, and most definitely his closest ally. And The more I read about Elaine Wynn, the more I like the lady. Like, she knew that Steve was the main driving force. Here's a quote from 2016. "The man is brilliant. I had a prominent role to play in our business, but he was the risk taker and the visionary." So she understood that Wynn was the driving force, but she was still equally involved. And by all accounts, an awful lot of the refinement and the class that people associate with their resorts is down to her input. So it looks like they worked great as a team, and they controlled nearly 20% of the company split down the middle. But as part of their divorce deal, Elaine agreed to vote her shares with Steve. But in 2012, she wanted to change that. She wanted her voting rights back. And the case dragged on for years, and it got nasty. She was even removed from the board, but she kept fighting. And as part of the legal proceedings, her legal team revealed details about a secret settlement. In 2005, Steve Wynn personally paid $7.5 million to a manicurist because the woman said he had pressured her into sex, and this payment was kept hidden from the board. And as happens in nearly all of these cases, that initial revelation opens up the floodgates. In January 2018, the Wall Street Journal published an investigative report, and it laid out years of alleged sexual misconduct by Steve Wynn. Dozens of women, flight attendants, salon workers, massage therapists. Wynn Resort stock plummeted. Steve Wynn, he initially issued this defiant statement, calling the accusations preposterous and blaming Elaine, but it didn't hold. Regulators opened investigations in Nevada and Massachusetts. Wynn resigned from his role as finance chair of the Republican National Committee because he was very active in the Republican Party, and within weeks he resigned as CEO and chairman of Wynn Resorts. He still denied everything, but by now his name it was radioactive. By mid-March, he sold all of his stock in the company for $2.1 billion and moved to Florida. And the findings from the investigation carried out with the Nevada Gaming Control Board, they were damning. The investigation revealed that multiple executives had known about the allegations against Wynn for years and failed to report them. It was like a full-blown systems failure. Wynn Resorts was fined $20 million, the largest fine in the state's history. Massachusetts followed with a $35 million fine. By the end of 2019, Steve Wynn's life had shrunk. Like, he stayed mostly in Palm Beach. He rarely appeared in public. He, kept close to his art collection, his yacht, and a small circle of friends. And then came another bizarre bombshell. In 2022, the US Department of Justice sued Wynn under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And the accusation was that in 2017, while he was still CEO of Wynn Resorts and the Republican National Committee finance chair, he lobbied the Trump administration on behalf of the Chinese government. Specifically, he allegedly pushed for the deportation of a Chinese dissident, and I'll put dissident in inverted commas, who was living in New York. Someone the Beijing government wanted apparently silenced. Wynn denied the allegations, said he wasn't a foreign agent, and a judge dismissed the case, citing a lack of legal precedent. And it should be noted that this so-called dissident, Gu Wengi, I think is how it's pronounced, is a Chinese real estate billionaire who many suspect of actually being a double agent and was working for the Chinese Communist Party. And he was also convicted in 2024 in the US for massive fraud and money laundering. So he wasn't a good guy. Anyway, for Wynn, the final blow came in 2023 when the Nevada Gaming Commission fined him personally $10 million, the largest individual disciplinary penalty ever handed down by state regulators. And as part of the settlement, he agreed never to work in the Nevada casino industry again. So throughout all this, Wynn has maintained his innocence. He's admitted to having relationships with staff, but said that they were consensual and that the original article in the Wall Street Journal was slanderous. And now, I know some people might point to the fact that there were never any criminal charges brought against him. That's true, but there were good reasons why. In relation to the 2005 incident that opened the floodgates, prosecutors couldn't bring a case because Nevada's 4-year statute of limitations had already run by 2009, and the 2015 change extending it to 20 years did not revive already expired claims. In relation to the other allegations, these long-standing allegations are going back years with NDAs, few records, witnesses reluctant to testify, and these cases are historically hard to prosecute. especially when there's no timely police report, forensic evidence, or corroboration. Now, Nevada authorities and regulators documented corporate failures to investigate, but those are regulatory and civil issues, not criminal charges. And look, it's hard to believe that he'd secretly pay 7.5 million to a person in 2005 to keep quiet about a consensual affair. Also, there were multiple allegations with the same MO, backed up by thorough investigations that found that many executives knew about the allegations and the incidents. Also, it's hard to believe that a man with Wynn's resources wouldn't sue the Wall Street Journal for their so-called slander. I don't buy it for a minute. Look, I know if I was a billionaire and wrongfully accused of such serious charges, I'd spend my last dollar proving my innocence. So where do we stand with Steve Wynn? Well, here's a quote from Michael Green, a long-time Las Vegas historian. He said, "Steve Wynn did more to create the modern Las Vegas mega resort experience than anyone else. In the mid-1980s, he said that Las Vegas didn't need another casino, but it sure could use an attraction. He was right and he delivered. The Mirage with its volcano, tropical rainforest theme, and Siegfried and Roy in the showroom. The Bellagio is a gold standard. The Wynn and the Encore also set high standards. Treasure Island expanded on the idea of an attraction, and indeed, he turned the Golden Nugget into a major hotel from a small gambling hall. His accomplishments are many." And all of that is true. And on Wall Street, Wynn was a moneymaker. In Nevada, he was royalty. He did transform Las Vegas. It is what it is today because of him. Full stop. In a Vanity Fair profile that I read on Wynn, the writer describes Wynn going to a rival hotel for a concert. The chairman of the company that owned that hotel, he welcomes Wynn, and then he thanked him for everything he had done for Las Vegas. So, even his rivals were grateful for what he had done. But now the legacy of Steve Wynn's massive achievements will be tarnished by all the sexual misconduct allegations of recent years, and rightly so. What this story shows is that while brilliance and vision and huge success might give you power over people, a truly good person doesn't abuse that power. And the reason behind Wynn's downfall shows that he's not a good person, and his legacy will always be tainted. And it's this trajectory of unparalleled success for 50 years, followed by a swift and very fitting fall, that makes Steve Wynn's story such a great business story. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And remember, if you have any comments, any corrections, or any story that you'd like us to cover, email us at info@gbspod.com. All the best, folks.